So welcome everyone to the corporate parenting meeting this afternoon. Really pleased that it can go ahead this time. Unfortunately, through various circumstances, last time it had to be deferred until today. Councillor Williams, who normally would be chairing this meeting, has ended up back in hospital, so a bit of a setback for us, so we wish her all the best and a speedy recovery. Please be mindful of the regulations in terms of how we conduct ourselves in terms of COVID, etc., and precautions we're taking. And finally, before I open the meeting, I think in one of the reports, it may have been deferred for this meeting, there was a reference to the death in service of a colleague in, I think, one of the children's homes. Which I was very sad to read. And I do think we ought to mark that as a mark of respect, not only for the loss of that colleague, but also for the colleagues that work with him, his family and friends. So can we start the meeting with a minute's silence in honour of that person? Thank you, everyone. I'm going to start the meeting then. Have we any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Williams, Councillor Lind, Steve Atkinson, Sharon Green, Andrew Kaiser, Jasmine Nembard-Francis, Andy Smith, Louise Bradley, Lorraine Smith and Marlene Upchurch. Thank you.
I have no late items to introduce, but we shall be moving some items earlier in the agenda. Just to let you know, item 5 has been deferred, so we won't be discussing that at the meeting, and items 8 and 10 will go higher in the order. So we'll take item 8 and then item 10 after we've gone through declarations of interest and minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of September 2021. Declarations of interest, just because we're a public meeting and there may be people looking in, this is a point where members are invited to declare any interest they have in the business on the agenda, including disposable pecuniary interests, and whether the group whip has been applied in respect of any of the matters under consideration. Can I just get confirmation that neither of those are correct, councillors? Yep, smashing, thank you. There are no late items, and we come now to the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of September 2021. Now, Councillors Hussain and Kuss and myself were there at the meeting, so they'll be able to tell us whether it's a true record. Well, the other two councillors beside myself. Were there any things that people wanted to clarify or ask questions on the minutes as presented? No. Good. Are we happy with all the resolutions, that they're an accurate record of the resolutions that were passed at the meeting for each of the items? We are happy. Good. All right. Are there any matters arising from those minutes which won't be covered later in the agenda? No. Thank you. Right. We'll now then move to item 8 on the agenda, Children's Homes Update, Inspection Regulation 44 reports and member visits.
Thank you, Chair. And also I'd like to acknowledge appreciation for the minute silence that you undertook at the beginning of the meeting in recognition of the staff member. Thank you. Chair, this is the annual report for our children's homes that outlines the inspection and monitoring activity over the past 12 months. And the first page outlines those different types of inspection and monitoring activity, which is regulated by Ofsted, but we also have our own internal independent visits through Regulation 44. And finally, we also have a programme which has currently been suspended due to COVID of elected members visiting, which is due to resume in the new year. If we move on to page 2, under the supporting information, you'll see that during COVID, we haven't had the full range of face-to-face inspections. There were none in 2020 for obvious reasons, but from the beginning of this year, those face-to-face inspections resumed. And if we turn over to page 3, we can see the current inspection outcomes of the homes. So we have 5 homes in total in Derby City, internal children's homes. One of those homes is currently closed, but for the other 4, we have first home that has just had their inspection recently, so this report is slightly outdated, so there was no judgment given in September, but there has been a recent inspection undertaken in October where the outcome requires improvement. Similarly with Home B, the last assurance visit on the 30th of September where no judgment was given, we have had a face-to-face inspection on the 10th of November, and that retained its good judgment, which we were very pleased about. Home C was in a period of inadequacy for a period of time. 14th of September, there was a further reinspection, and that has now come out of compliance, and that has received the judgment of requires improvement to be good, but it's on the track to good on that pathway now. Home D is currently closed, and Home E again has undertaken a full inspection in May this year and retained its good judgment. So we have a mixed picture within our children's homes. We have some clear progression for some of them, and we still have a way to go. In terms of previous issues that Ofsted have picked up, some of the issues have been around the matching of children within placements. We have, as been previously reported to this committee, a national sufficiency shortage of appropriate placements for children looked after, both within the fostering side, but also within external residential, together with lack of movability because of COVID, and where we've needed to place children because of lack of placements. Some of those decisions have not necessarily taken into consideration the full matching of all of the other children. We are getting much better at that now. Movement has been more permissible, and so therefore that side is improving. However, the sufficiency of placements still remains a national challenge, and particularly for Derby. Moving on to the next page, we do face other challenges within our children's homes, particularly with recruitment of appropriate staff. Again, there is a national shortage of posts at all levels really, both at the residential worker level, but also at the manager level. We've had a considerable churn within the staffing group throughout COVID and continues to be. However, we do have very clear recruitment processes that is corporately supported. We have a rolling programme, an advert. We have huge support from our HR services within the council. And we do get a lot of interest in the roles. However, the reality of the nature of the work sometimes is probably underestimated by those people that apply. But we do have a full training programme and qualifications that are wrapped around. So that continues to be a continual challenge, both within the worker side, but also the manager side. In terms of education, again, there's been challenges over this past year. But again, we've worked very closely with our virtual school, who have been absolutely excellent in terms of providing that support, and where children could not enter into school, they have provided individual education and support within the home. And again, the situation is much improving there, and Ofsted on more latter visits have acknowledged that the education side has been satisfactory in terms for those children. In terms of health, we have again a very strong relationships with our looked after nurse, and again have a really great programme in terms of healthy eating and looking at all of those health concerns around the home. And we do have our looked after nurse in the meeting today, who no doubt will be able to talk a little bit more about the work that has been done around supporting the children's homes. We have had some issues around accessing immediate services such as dentistry, etc. But again, this is now progressing, as with most things, as we've started to unlock a little bit more. In terms of elected members' visits, these were suspended. However, there are plans in place to resume these from the new year. The matter has been discussed both at the Children's Scrutiny Committee and also with our Cabinet member. And there will be a training session soon and a programme of visits in the early new year, as and when we can safely do that. So that is now back in scope. In terms of the Regulation 44 visits, these are outlined here against each home. There were no major issues identified in terms of their overall assessments during the year. There have been some minor practice issues that were noted, such as recording, bits of training, staff development, etc. But they have all been addressed as they've arisen, and are all progressing as required. And of course, the Regulation 44 independent visitor always closes the loop on each visit as they return. Okay. And just finally on page 6, to note that, as I've said, closing the loop, the recommendations from the Regulation 44 visits are also complemented by the homes manager, who then undertakes a Regulation 45 activity to ensure that all of those actions are done and ready for the next month. Okay. I'm happy to take any questions from the report, Chair. Thank you.
Have councillors any questions on this report? Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to start by saying that I fully appreciate the difficult time everyone's gone through, including staff who work for our departments, including children's services. It's been difficult to keep the ship afloat. I appreciate all that. But despite all that, I am quite disappointed to see that we're not doing better in our homes with the assessment outcome, where we've been shown to be inadequate. And the reason I'm disappointed is I expect our service providers, whether especially ones which are the services that are provided in-house, that we need to be setting an example for others to follow. And it undermines our moral authority when we criticize people who are providing services privately. Because if we are struggling to set a standard, then how can we look our private partners in the eye and say, we expect better from you? For those reasons, I am very, very disappointed, and I think we need to be doing better. And we also need to be taking this item very seriously to make sure that standards are improved and that we are setting an example for others to follow.
Thank you, Councillor, and I fully appreciate what you're saying and take on board that challenge. In terms of our homes, we have 50% that are assessed as good, and I do appreciate that the other two are requiring improvement, of which there is a huge amount of work around those homes in order to bring those back into that expected standard. And I absolutely agree, our children that we are the corporate parents for expect that and environment for staff to have worked in, and for the children themselves. The children have got very, very complex needs that we are working with, and accessibility during the last 18 months, 2 years, to all of those services that they would ordinarily be able to freely access has been severely limited. In terms of decisions that we make around those children, that there is no other placement for them nationally, and therefore we cannot have a child who does not have a placement, and where we perhaps do not have the right match but a vacancy within one of our homes. It's a compromise that we have to then make that decision. Unfortunately, Ofsted will not recognise necessarily that the sufficiency issue. So in terms of the quality of care for our children, I think that is second to none. I think our staff are well trained. I think that we provide a lot of support. I think that our multi-agency partnerships that we have through our looked after nursing, through our virtual school, I think that they are absolutely excellent in terms of what they provide and what they have continued to provide consistently. I think sometimes when we have had to place children which has not necessarily matched, I think that's where Ofsted have disagreed with some of our practice, although it's Hobson's choice really. What do you do with a child if they don't have a placement and we have a vacancy but that child doesn't necessarily match with the rest of that home? We have to take that risk and note that Ofsted will penalise us for that, but it's a difficult situation, Councillor.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Councillor Hussain. I'll just remind everyone that, we as councillors are the corporate parents, and that we four councillors sitting today are kind of sitting in the place of all 51 councillors. And you were quite right to raise concerns. I'm sure there's a collective concern. I think you put it into context. looking at it, there has been some slight progress from, for example, inadequate to requires improvement. That period of requires improvement, I would have hoped would have been foreshortened to a good. But clearly there are issues in terms of what's happening at the moment and the impact. The desperate need to recruit staff who are of the right quality and capacity to deliver and make a difference in those homes. And I think we need to be, we do need to see urgently some improvement. There are examples of good practice. Some, I mean, I'm being simplistic here. Why don't you take a manager that's running a good establishment and put them in the one of them that isn't and is moving towards it but hasn't achieved that yet. Despite all that, I do think we ought to, although these judgments have been made and we're not happy with them because they're adverse and reflect reputationally on us as corporate parents, there has been some progress and the circumstances have been very difficult, but we would like to see quicker progress. And I noticed there are issues about record keeping, etc., which is obviously essential because of the fluidity of somebody's position might change and we need accurate records if they're going to be moved somewhere else. Councillor Harith Hussain.
Yeah, sorry to have to come in again. Suan, having listened to your explanation, I do appreciate that difficulties can materialize of that nature. However, it poses worry for me because there might be some inadequacy in our commissioning strategy. If some of these children were misplaced because we could not find appropriate placement for them elsewhere, but actually that raises more of a red alert for me than before, because unless you can spell out how some of those issues are being addressed to ensure that either we've got arrangements in place in-house to make sure we have arrangements in place to make sure that the children whose needs are a bit of a mismatch in terms of what we are able to offer and what their actual requirements are. Both in the private sector, if you could address the commissioning issue, and secondly, if you could briefly share with me what is being done to make sure that we are able to respond to specific needs of those children whose commissioning of care wasn't successfully be able to commission from the private sector, or specific homes which might specialise in that type of care.
Certainly, Councillor. I mean, if I take the commissioning side first, we clearly have a home that is currently closed, that we are recruiting to a new manager, and then that will increase our internal capacity. We also have, as part of the wider learning of the needs of young people over the past 2 or 3 years, I did mention that they were complex. Sometimes young people do not function well in homes that are of the size of 4 or 5 with young people within. And we are actively looking at and planning and due to implement a small homes programme over the next 12 months. The commissioning side, because it's quite complex in terms of looking at the planning of sufficient accommodation. The commissioning side is also looking at a range of different options, both across the D2N2 footprint, working collaboratively with other local authorities who are in absolutely the same situation as us. And if not some are in a worse situation. So I appreciate you are disappointed in our performance internally, but there are other areas that are significantly worse than Derby. So we have a range of different programmes. We also are, in terms of our internal accommodation, and Judy Levitt will talk about the fostering side. We are increasing that range and offer for our children to have the most appropriate placement that will meet their needs, if that's within a family or their extended family. And there are a number of different offers that are being developed in that respect. So the commissioning is strategic commissioning can take time. It's about the planning, it's about looking at the needs, it's about looking at the availability of placements that are available in the local area. I mean, ideally we would want to have our Derby children close to Derby. We need to work alongside our private sector. I don't think that it's a mixed economy now in terms of it's probably unrealistic that we would provide every single placement for all of our children. So commissioning are working alongside the private sector to ensure that those placements that are in and around Derby prioritise and take children from the local area as opposed to from different parts of the country, and those conversations are being undertaken. That, together with the developments internally and strengthening our children's home offer and growing those the size of the children's homes, will enable us to be able to meet the needs of those children that unfortunately do not fare very well when they're placed in a larger home. And you will recall, Councillor, that we have been through we went through a capital investment. I think it was started in the early 2011, 12, and it took a long time for us to build the new children's homes that were probably only finished and opened around 2018. I think the final one was opened. By that time, because of the time taken, we know that children's needs have changed so much in terms of their need to have probably more smaller homes placements, that actually those homes are quite large now. I know that they were significantly smaller from the homes that were originally there, but those are quite large now for complex children with ASD and child sexually exploited behaviours, etc., to be placed. So, we are on that trajectory of having a broad range of different homes so that we can meet those needs, and that will be coming into fruition over the next 12 months. Thank you.
Have any councillors questions on other areas of the report? Right. I mean, there's lots of areas there which are really good, and we're really grateful and pleased that work's happening. I do think the discussion we've had needs to be reflected on the recommendations. We have 2 recommendations at the moment for this item. To note the content of the report as inspections are a key element of the regulatory function in relation to children's homes, and that management visits are a statutory requirement. And 2.2 is to note the content of the report as a corporate parent. I think we need a 3rd and 4th resolution. One is that councillors or members of the board look forward to being able to take part in visits. And before, that's not part of the wording, this is not part of the wording, but what we've seen with our own eyes helps us to be more informed and get an overall picture. And that doesn't necessarily come out in a report, which has to have certain guidelines. So what have we got so far with that, Lindsay?
Councillors and members look forward to be able to take part in visits.
In visits to our children's homes after training. That's the first one. I would say. And I think the next one needs to be that the committee is concerned at the slow progress towards good for a category from Ofsted by all children's homes which are open, and that we wish that every effort is made to make an improvement on that position in the near future.
Councillor, if I can just advise the committee that the grading for the homes is an annual grading. There will be an interim visit after 6 months. The grading cannot change until the next annual visit. So for those that are requiring improvement, it will be October and November 2022 before that grading changes.
Thank you, that's helpful as background. I think the essence of this is that effort is made to make sure there's an improvement as soon as possible. I'm sure you're doing that, but we just need to see evidence of that. And the evidence could be by any internal audits which are done and which give us reassurance. So we're seeking reassurance, really, that that progress is there. It may be slower than we might want because of external circumstances through COVID, staffing, all sorts of issues. And we don't know what's around the corner in terms of restrictions through COVID. But I do think it's important that the recommendation reflects what we as corporate parents would like to see, with every confidence that that work is being done anyway. We'd just like to see, particularly some meeting before that, we'd like to see some kind of evidence, even if it's by internal audit, against the framework, whichever is applying from Ofsted, that progress is being made towards a good.
Absolutely happy to provide that for you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hussain.
Just to add to that recommendation, that we receive a progress report in 6 months' time to reassure us that we are...
Just to formalise that, we could add that to that fourth recommendation that I've suggested, and the final words will be we should receive a progress report in 6 months' time. Did councillors wish to add any other recommendations? I suppose a fifth one ought to be, in context, the committee thanks all those involved in our children's homes with the work done to keep our children safe during COVID.
Thank you, Chair.
Are we all happy with that final recommendation? Right, I think now we're going to item 10.
Chair, I'm taking this report as well, in the absence of Andrew Kaiser. So the report in front of you is the updated Q2 report on the work of the Child Permanence team. And the first page outlines the purpose of the team, which has been in place since 2013. And achieved a huge amount of success in safely exiting a number of our looked after children from care over the years. The Children's Permanence team is an absolute fundamental part of our strategic demand management for children's services. And as such has a number of targets attached to the working of the team to achieve during the year. So on page 2, in supporting information, you'll see that there's an expectation that this particular team will safely exit 28 children from care during the 12-month period, and that they will actively support and exit 35 children through adoption. So this report outlines the work of the team and the progression to that at Q2. Page 3 exemplifies the staffing arrangements in the team and provides detail on some of the quarter one activity. And page 4 outlines the caseloads and some of the workload that the teams have had. But in respect of where we are in terms of progression towards those targets, that we need to move to page 6. So at this current time, bearing in mind we have a target of 25 to exit. At the end of quarter 2, we've had a total of 12 exits at this point. So we were well on the way to achieving that at the half-point stage. 4.7 outlines the projected forecast for the next 6 months, and there's been a lot of activity within teams to identify potential children who could exit through what's called a special guardianship order to live with either extended family or assessed friends. And there are a further 20 that are in those early stages, and we are absolutely certain that there will at least be 2 in quarter 3 or 4. The team manager, Vicky Peeling, who wrote the report, is confident that we will achieve the 25 by the end of the year. In terms of adoption, this has been slightly quieter during the first part of the year. And again, there's quite a lot of information that outlines the activity and what the teams are working on. But on page 9, we can see that at this point in time, we have had 10 children out of the 35 placed for adoption by the end of quarter 2. And there are 10 children of quarter 2. But there are, sorry, apologies, Chair. Yeah, and sorry, I believe that there's a further 17 adoption orders due to be made. So apologies, Chair. The projected numbers for quarter 3, we do have a number that are due to be moving through the system, and the number there is 67. We have had some issues with some backlogs in the court arena, which is why we had a quieter period in quarter 1 and 2, and working absolutely with the courts and through the Local Family Justice Board around making sure that we are getting those children into their permanent placement. So again, we are confident that we will be achieving the full 35 placements by the end of quarter 4, and as we can see at the end of paragraph 5.13, there is a projected 22 placements by the end of quarter 3, which mean that 13 of those placements are expected to be progressed in quarter 4. It's very challenging and dependent on the court. It's not just our services. We're obviously reliant on wider services to ensure that happens. But we are confident that will happen. You'll note in the report that this is a very busy team. There's lots happening. There's been a significant amount of referrals for family and friends placement with parents. It's a very busy team, but one that is absolutely achieving results. So I'm happy to take any questions that the committee has. Thank you.
Are there any questions, councillors? No. Thank you. It's a really well updated report because it's now dealing with up to now, and thank you to the officer who wrote it to update it and make it so clear to us, although there's a lot of figures that are presented. I'd just like to turn to, I'd made a note on, I think it was item 410, the strengths and weaknesses. I think they are being very modest in terms of putting forward their strengths, and I think they ought to be more singing their praises in terms of the skills and resource capacity they have and how much they make a difference. And that's being borne out by the figures. It's really pleasing to see so many people, you know, in line to be placed, etc., all be well. And again, against a background of, you know, COVID and all those things. So, I mean, it's a real credit to that team, and I think they ought to sing their praises a bit more highly in talking about their strengths and weaknesses. It was, I think it was good to see in 411 that they're going to work closely with the Children in Care Service to explore the use of CAOs as a way of exiting children to the care of kinship carers. And also that thing about absent fathers and what resource there may be there. There may be lots of absent fathers or some absent fathers who could step in and be, you know, fathers in the true sense of the word. And actually not be absent for their child. So I hope that bears fruition. Clearly, with the proviso that that's done knowing that that child will go into a safe environment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it does absolutely reflect the vision of early help and children's social care over the past 2 years, of our vision of stronger families, resilient children, and really exploring wider family connections and extended family as being the primary source of care, rather than to either maintain children within the care system or within placements. And as I said, Judy Levitt will be able to explain more about the development of those particular projects, because we are absolutely having a focus on that area. Thank you.
And Councillor Fareed Hussain.
Suhan, can I ask whether we could ever hope to have a greater equilibrium between exits and entries, and the two matching? For example, if new cases are running at 35 a year, where we are looking for permanent arrangements for exit, and exits achieve, or is that too unrealistic and too...
It's probably not quite as simple as that, Councillor. We will only exit where it's safe to exit. So there are some natural exit points where a young person reaches 18, but clearly where family situation or the child's situations change, or the family situations change, because they often do, and our independent reviewing officer service every 6 months look at whether or not the child's birth family situation has changed, and could this be a safe time to be able to plan and what's a map home, basically. But I don't think it's quite as simple to say one in, one out. I don't think we could do that, if that's what you were saying, and apologies if I've mistaken that.
Basically, that's what I was referring to, whether we could set a target which is actually based on those numbers, and then work and see why those targets could not be achieved. And then we could, I'm sure you're right. I mean, I am being over-optimistic in that sense, but it was deliberate to see if we could aim for it and then come up with a reason where it simply can't happen.
I understand what you mean, Councillor. However, we unfortunately are not able to have unmet need in the city. So where children are presented, and you will know that we at the beginning of COVID, there was a huge spike in terms of need, where families were struggling to look after their children for whatever reason, and the reasons are multiple in terms of why families struggle. We did have quite a high influx. The optimum performance would be that, yes, we would have more exits than entries coming in, but unfortunately society doesn't work like that, and you will appreciate that we've recently had the national news of Arthur Hughes, who will no doubt spike a lot of anxiety nationally within both our partners, but also in terms of ability and ability for children not to come into care. There will be envisage a huge pressure placed upon the local authority to be receiving referrals as a consequence of that. So there are other dynamics as well as children's needs at play that sometimes don't enable us to have that very neat approach to exits and entries of care. Thank you.
If I could just say something, Councillor. In terms of entrance into care, obviously that is an option of last resort, really. We don't want children coming into care because we know the best place for children in most situations is within the family home. And obviously what we try to do is support families, but there are situations where it's unsafe for those children to remain within the family home, and there are no options within the wider family, and then children come into care. In terms of thresholds, coming from an IRO service perspective, we're assured that the right children come into care appropriately, so we aren't getting children into care that don't need to be in care. We've explored options, and as Suana said, what we try to do is work really hard to try and find permanence for those children as soon as we can, whether that be through adoption, whether that be through supporting parents and those children returning back home where it's safe, or whether that be through other forms of permanence in relation to extended family, or foster carers even taking on supervision orders and special guardianship orders or child arrangement orders. But there is a kind of a backdrop. There is an increase in the number of children in care nationally. We know that that's growing, and for whatever reason, we've not got to the bottom of that, but Derby is no different in relation to that. So our numbers have gradually creeped up, but we are continue to work really hard to try and find permanence for our children in care in a very timely and an appropriate way. And as Suana said, as an IRO service, we quality assure that. Social workers work really hard, IROs work really hard to make sure that children are exited from care at the most earliest, safest possible time.
Thank you. Can I just make some observations on, I think it's 4.3. In the previous version of this item, it talks about Q1, and it mentioned that case responsibility for the team had collectively responsibility for 18 cases as the responsible social worker. That's gone down to 17, right? So it's good that, because they do really important work, and there's only so much work you can cope with on your plate at any one time. And they co-work 14 cases as assessors, which has gone slightly up from 12 cases. And I think we ought to have a recommendation that should there be a greater demand on the service, that every effort is made to recruit, to retain those levels of caseload with this team, who are obviously very effective and really know what they're about, and we know they're making decisions so that children are placed, and they're placed safely. But they're also exploring other avenues, which is great. So I'm just thinking how our council is happy that we have that resolution, because I do think it's important that this team is supported in terms of some reassurance that if numbers rocket, they're not going to be ended up with caseloads that are not manageable. And even if it means you get agency people in if you can't recruit, we need to make sure that that level of quality is maintained. Have you captured that?
Yes, I have, John. Should there be a greater demand on the service, every effort should be made to maintain those caseloads levels.
Are we happy with that, councillors? Yeah. Are there any other suggested recommendations? Well, I'd like to personally thank, and I hope it's on behalf of everyone, the work that that team does. Yeah, and we very much value that as corporate parents.
Thank you, Chair.
We now go to item 6, because item 5's been deferred. Children's Placements Overview Report.
Yeah, that's myself, Chair, presenting. Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Evans, and I'm Commissioning Manager for Children in Care and Placements. Good to meet you today. So the report provides an overview on the types of placements Derby City Council makes for children and young people. It provides key information on the use of external provision for Derby City Council in care to ensure we have safe homes and support for children and young people. The recommendation of the report under 2.1 is for the board just to consider the contents of the update report. So in terms of the range of placements we source, we work with internal fostering and internal children's homes, external fostering through independent fostering agencies, external parent and baby fostering, external children's homes, external semi-independent supported accommodation, secure welfare placements and respite placements as well. We source these placements through framework, so a procured list of contracted providers that have gone through all the quality checks, and these are used to source homes and support for our children and young people. And there's 3 main avenues. So we use the D2N2 Children in Care framework for our fostering and children residential homes. We use the Derby Supported Accommodation DPS, which is a dynamic purchasing system, a procurement method for 16 to 17-year-olds for semi-independent placements. And we also use Nottinghamshire's dynamic purchasing system for semi-independent placements for more complex needs of our 16 to 17-year-olds and care leavers. So just to give a bit of an overview, the commissioning service supports the operational teams within children's social care and early help to find the most appropriate placements to meet the needs of the children and young people that we care for. This service also liaises with internal fostering and internal residential for placement availability before contacting external providers. Point 4.3 of the report highlights the continued increasing demand on sourcing placements. We've just spoken about the increasing numbers coming into care, and it details the increased demand on these placements, especially around external placements as well. The report also highlights challenges as a result of these increased placement numbers, as well as we're seeing an increase in complex behaviours which need to be supported within a home environment. At point 4.9, we highlight the shortage of foster carers both within Derby, the region and nationally. And it's been in the news lately as well around this area. We work closely with our fostering agencies. We organise regular forums and meetings to discuss securing local placements for our young people, about foster care recruitment and retention, and about additional support or barriers that they're facing in our area. We've also put in place a placement officer to work closely between ourselves and internal fostering to ensure the match is right, and we're looking at our internal foster carers first, and that's working really positively, and really want to thank internal foster for their ongoing work in supporting placements. In addition, we're working with providers with local provision to deliver Derby City residential provision, and we're looking at a block contract through the D2N2, so that's Derby, Derbyshire, Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Children in Care framework in the new year. So we're looking at placing young people as close as possible, where that's safe to in Derby, and using the provision we've got here to allocate those residential placements. From the latest Ofsted reports, it shows that we do have adequate provision numbers in the city. What we're seeing is a large number of what we call out-of-area authorities placing within the city, and what the block will allow us to do is to secure those placements for our children and be able to put those local wraparound support structures in place, which is really key to us. At point 4.13, it's just showing around sort of semi-independent and supported accommodation. We don't necessarily have what we call a sufficiency concern in this area, so the number of placements. However, we continue to review and consult on our commission services with our young people, our social care teams, our health teams and our providers. And it's resulted in the following approaches due to be implemented. So we're working on a pilot project between Derby City Council and Derby Homes to deliver accommodation and support packages tailored to specific young people's needs. We're also looking at a block contract around supported accommodation, specifically in Derby, with a small number of providers. And we're also looking at more of a D2N2, so Derby, Derbyshire, Nottingham, Nottinghamshire approach, as we have done with foster and residential, because that's allowed us to work closer with the market, external market, and have more influence over it. So we've seen the benefits coming out of that, and we're wanting to put that into this market. In terms of just moving on to sort of quality, we are constantly ensuring that the quality of provision is offering safe and suitable accommodation and support for our young people, working positively with social care and providers. Most of our settings are inspected by Ofsted, so these regulated settings include independent fostering agencies and residential children's homes. We also, as I say, work with semi-independent supported accommodation, which are non-regulated and are subject to pre-placement checks and ongoing checks and quality visits to ensure we are placing our young people in the most suitable provision. In terms of understanding the voice of the young person, we've done a large amount of consultation in this area through direct conversations with young people about the provision that they're receiving, through feedback through social workers and the Children in Care Council, as well as providers' direct interventions and feedback with young people. And we also ask for face-to-face feedback from our young people as part of the quality assurance visits as well. And this is all embedded into service improvements that we put in place. In terms of just touching on the last area around financial, so spend on external placements continues, especially to be a priority area. We'll review it at least every fortnight through our placements panel in place to ensure all support packages are reviewed. We have fee reviews, discounts agreed and cost negotiation to give the best value for public money while still meeting the needs of the child. All of the development work that goes on has a clear focus on ensuring high quality placements which match the child's needs and deliver excellent outcomes, but we still are looking at providing the best value for public money within these packages as well. Are there any questions?
Councillors, have we any questions on the report? I'd just like to note at 4.17 the quality assurance for anywhere that's at arm's length from the organisation in terms of provision. I think that's extremely important. I think I picked up that you get feedback from residents, our young people who are in that accommodation regularly, to make sure that what they've been promised is being delivered.
Yes.
Yeah. From the terms of the at arm's length provider, I'm sure the support is there from our side, or I would hope that it continues. And I think that's really important, given that there could be a rise in numbers which are coming into the system, and rightly should be. If they should be in the system because of this, there's concerns about their safety, then they should be with us. but they should also be, if they're taken from their families, placed somewhere which is suitable,
Yes.
yeah, and of a good quality, and the sort of thing you'd want your own son or daughter to be put in if it was in that in those circumstances. And I'm sure we as corporate parents would have that view. And I am speaking on behalf of 51 councillors, but I can't see any quibbling on that. So I'm reassured by that, and I'm particularly reassured that feedback's taken, and obviously that's valued. And if things aren't going right for what's been promised, then obviously somewhere else is found, and presumably anyone else in that situation with that provider would be moved to somewhere of a higher quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
terms of, depending on the feedback, we either work with that young person, that provider, to
Yeah.
make resolutions that's satisfactory, or yes, it would be a placement move and others in there. So yeah, we act on all complaints and issues raised, yeah.
Are there any other questions? I do think it would be worth putting in the recommendations that councillors are reassured by the level of scrutiny and quality assurance of outside providers, which are, I think their term is unregulated.
Yeah, that's good.
In unregulated settings.
Thank you.
Are other councillors happy with that resolution? Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for the report.
No problem.
Yeah.
I think I've got another one coming up as well.
And,
I think I've got item 7 as well.
I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to Suan, but thanks very much and have a nice Christmas.
I've got one more item.
Oh, you're sorry.
So you're
Oh.
not getting rid of me this quick.
I take it back. Right, we're on to item 7 then.
Yeah, that's mine as well. So
The STARS programme that you refer to. Yeah.
that's exactly. So the following report is on the social impact bond STARS. So it provides an update to Corporate Parenting Board on the progress of the STARS programme. The recommendation under 2.1 is to note the performance of the programme to date. So just want to give you a bit of an overview of what STARS is. Derby City Council is working in partnership with both Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire County Councils, so we refer to this as DN2, to deliver an evidence-based service that supports children on the edge of care and in care. It's called STARS, and that stands for Supporting Children and Young People to Achieve Resilience. The contracted funding model for STARS is slightly different to some of the other programmes that we commission, so it's via what's called a social impact bond, a SIB, and these form a social investment increasingly used to fund service improvements involving a local authority or more than one, in this case, a private social investor and a provider to deliver the service. Payments are made on an outcomes being met, so it's an outcomes payment service rather than the traditional methods of service funding. They also bring additional investment into interventions which would not normally be affordable in the local area. So the STARS programme is part of our strategy to find placement interventions which improve outcomes and that are better value for money in line with the Council's medium-term financial plan. So STARS began in November 2020, so we've just passed our first year milestone, and the desired outcomes of the programme are to achieve long-term stable family-like placements and, where possible, for children to remain at home with their families, so supporting Suan's report. So the STARS programme supports interventions for parents and carers of children and young people who either A, currently live in residential care and their care plan is to step them across to foster care, B, are currently living in foster care and at high risk of placement breakdown or at risk of entering residential care, so we're supporting them to remain stable in that foster care environment. C, are currently looked after by the local authority, but the local authority are looking to for reunification with birth family or primary carers. Or D, they're currently defined as being on the edge of care or at risk of being taken into care, and we're supporting them to remain in their families or primary carers so they do not come into care. So over the lifetime, which is a 4-year programme, obviously we've just reached the end of year 1, there's 66 children and young people in Derby that we hope to support. I just wanted at this point, the achievements and numbers are at 0.4, 0.8, but I just wanted to give some of the headline successes and some of the challenges that the programme's faced to date as well. So year 1 targets have been met across the DN2 region, so that's Derby and the 2 Nottingham authorities, which ensures those children and their families who are receiving the service and social investors are meeting their targets as well. We hold bi-monthly what we call exchange events, which continue to provide the opportunity for matching children to placements. So where we're looking for a child to move from a residential to a foster placement, we work with a large number of independent fostering agencies, and the social worker comes along to our event and talks about that young person, brings them alive, can answer direct questions from the agencies, and the agencies come along with potential matches for those young people, and that's working really successfully. So we're running those bi-monthly at the moment. There continues to be increased referrals, especially around our cohort D, Edge of Care. So we're really looking at that prevention work that's going on to prevent children and young people coming into care. And in terms of our satisfaction surveys from families and professionals that have worked on STARS, we've received some really good feedback, and I just wanted to highlight some of the cases and the words from other people in that. So on one of our cases where a young person has moved from residential to foster, the quote from the worker was, "M went on Saturday morning in the end as wanted a final breakfast with his support workers, but has settled into Jay's incredibly well, and there's been no issue at all. The carers described him as the missing jigsaw piece for their family, and everyone has remarked that they have seen together how it seems to be always that way. This was a really positive match. I'm sure there will be little hiccups along the way, but a really strong start, and couldn't have asked more from professionals and STARS." In terms of another professional wrote, "I really enjoyed working alongside STARS professionals to gain positive outcomes for the pupil and the family. It was good to have expanded support and ensure a consistent approach." And one of the carers had stated they only had STARS involved for a few months until our young person moved on to a forever family, as we are emergency carers. In this time, we felt very supported and valued as carers. You're doing an amazing job, and we value your support. So in terms of some of the voices coming back, as with any new programme and new way of delivering, we do experience some challenges along the way and are working on those challenges. So the SIB model is an outcome model with financial investors involved. So we have a delivery arm, but we also have financial investors that we report back to. So it's not a traditionally commissioned service. And despite meeting year 1 targets, implementation of year 1 has provided the service with great success and also challenges. The commissioning team is working with Social Care and Outcomes for Children, the provider who delivers the service, to continually listen to feedback to improve the offer and outcomes for our children and young people and their families. And some of the areas that we're really focusing, concentrating on improvements are clearer eligibility criteria and communication on why cases haven't met the criteria, support families where engagement from family members might be limited and how we can increase that engagement, ensuring the model delivered can support other interventions alongside it at the same time, such as therapy with the child and young person or carers, support when there's changes to the care plan for the young person, more flexibility in the model to support periods of instability or crisis within that family, and the recruitment and retention of staff on the programme as well. So Section 7 just highlights how an outcomes-based model is supporting the savings and cost avoidance and the award of the Life Chances Fund to pay towards the outcomes payments. The programme funding is due to end in October 2024. So that's my overall. It's just if you've got any questions at all.
Have councillors any questions on this? Councillor Pandy.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to know who are the beneficiary of these payments? And then if the program is ending in 2024, what will happen after that? The progress what they are making, what will happen to that? Will it all get lost? So these are the two questions at the moment.
Yep, happy to answer those. So the beneficiaries of the payment, so the local authority through the funding that they've been awarded from government pay an outcomes payment on the successful outcome of that, either that child moving to foster and having a period of stability or remaining at home if it's reunification or staying within the home. And it's a 2-year programme of support that supports, so if for the 2-year period, if it's successful, we as a local authority pay an outcome payment, which we have funding through the Life Chances Fund to pay. So the local authority with this funding pays the service provider, who in this case is Outcomes for Children. Does that answer that question?
And how is it audited? Sorry, Chair. Yeah. How is it audited? Like, how do you ensure the money, the funding you have provided for is being utilized for the right reasons?
So there's a clear model of delivery, of activity, and this is tracked by our sales and commissioning, but also the social worker and the team manager for the child that the programme is wrapped around. There are regular meetings and updates and reporting into those regular meetings.
And it seems like only 66 has been chosen for this, 66 children?
Yeah.
Any particular criteria to select those 66? Thanks.
In terms of, there could be more than 66. We set 66 as a minimum referral target into this programme, but the programme has the ability to grow if we want to refer more than that to it. And we're seeing the benefits in terms of the outcomes and the cost avoidance and the financial savings. Referrals are determined at their point of need, so the social worker refers into the programme if they feel their child and young person needs this service and they would benefit from it. And there are currently clear eligibility criteria and thresholds set for each of those around that. Is that okay? And then in terms of answering your second question around the financial programme runs up until 2024, the intervention will continue for another 2 years after that because it's a 2-year programme. We are currently, even though we're only at the end of year 1, reviewing what the exit plan is for this programme, depending on the success of it. And by receiving the Life Chances Fund and a private investor, it allowed us to model this outcomes payment and test it as a pilot for us for a local authority to see if it's giving us the benefits both for outcomes and financially. If it is, and we are reviewing that, then we can model either an in-house or we can look for further funding to extend this programme.
Councillor Hussain?
Chair, I'm actually quite keen on this concept that if needs can escalate, we could put arrangements in place which may help de-escalate those needs. Although, as a concept, it's a very attractive one because we're not used to thinking in those terms. But we'll have to monitor the progress, obviously, very carefully to make sure things which have been promised are actually delivered before we make the payments. But if as a scheme it is successful, then I'm sure it'll be worth our while to expand the concept and place more children under the scheme, and that might provide us with a way forward as we go forward as an authority. Because obviously, we looked at the previous report, and the numbers are projected to go up and up. And if at the same time we have been able to find a way of de-escalating some of those needs, which will not only produce more desirable outcomes for the individual children concerned, but will actually save us a bit of money as well. But as I say, it is relatively new, so we'll have to keep an eye on it and see how things develop from here on.
Yes, a very valid point, Councillor Hussain. I mean, I suppose for us councillors, there's a kind of duality of issues about this. It's about outcomes and value for money. As councillors, we're always interested in value for money. But as corporate parents, we're interested in outcomes. And, you know, I'm always going to be in putting myself in the position where I want to be reassured that outcomes are there. And it's kind of payment by results in a way, isn't it? You could put it back that way, but it's probably not the sort of thing the government uses as terminology. So I think it's really important that the outcomes are, and I'm sure the authority sees it not only as a way to save money and get value for money, but also to make sure outcomes are more robust and protracted. So it's not a kind of, and there is ongoing stuff after the payment is made, or that's really important, because, you know, we don't want, it's all boxes are ticked, everything's all right. There is continuing stuff, and that's reassuring for us, I think, and I think it covers the point Councillor Pandy was trying to get at, and I hope you're reassured by the answer you've got, but we obviously need to see evidence in terms of outcomes and what data you have in the future. And I agree with Councillor who said that if we can roll it out, if it is providing outcomes which are really favourable for our young people, that's great, and we would want to extend it. The only other thing I wanted to mention was we've had talk today of, you know, there may be, because of COVID, if there are further lockdowns, because of the heightened vigilance of the public in terms of children's safety in the home and everywhere else, I would hope, there may be more referrals in category C or D under 4.4. So it would be good to have the capacity to use resources from this element to support any new entrants into the system. Because as I've said before, if they should be in the system, they should be in it. And, you know, that's for their interests. Yeah? And we want good outcomes for them.
So just one more question. Yeah, sorry. What do private investors mean in this report? Who are the private investors and what is their role exactly? Thank you.
Okay, so the SIB model, we have private investors, which is a company called Futures, based in the region, and they put upfront funding to run the service. What we do is on each cohort, they have an opportunity for a return on investment if referral numbers are hit. So if local authorities are hitting their referral numbers by the end of the programme, they will receive a return in investment on their upfront investment to the provider to run this service. So the council do not pay the money to the provider to run the service, the private investor does.
So it's basically that they're speculating on providing good outcomes. And if those outcomes are there and protracted and have some permanence, then they get a return on their investment.
Yes, that's correct.
So that's the model, Councillor Pandy.
And they have a social value consciousness part as a local financial provider in the area. Sorry,
I might be struggling to understand this. Return of investment from whom? If we're talking finance, in terms of finance, where are they getting the return of investment from? In what form?
So through our grant, through the Life Chances Fund, we pay outcomes payments to the company, and then they get to the provider, and then they will pass on that financial investment if all referral numbers are hit. So it's built into that outcome payment. We have £3 million from the Life Chances Fund. If we expand the programme, then the council will be paying those outcome payments, but it would be out of cost savings or cost avoidance to the council.
Sorry, again.
It's okay.
Because, you know, I'm still trying to understand. So who owns the Life Chances Fund?
So that's government funding that we sourced at the beginning before we went live with this programme that we bid to be awarded. So it's a grant funding.
So they're not private investors who club together and speculate basically on providing something which would have a good outcome for society, but will get a return for it.
Yes.
Right. It is very complicated for us as lay people to understand, and I'm sure there'll be other people in the council who wouldn't be able to understand it until they were fully briefed. I suggest, because it is quite complex, and if there are, I mean, I think I'm happy enough to understand as much as I need to understand to scrutinise this report. But if any councillors wish to get further information or understanding, could you contact the officer?
Yeah. Contact myself by all means. I'm happy to do a briefing about it and answer any questions. So, yeah, more than happy to do that.
Okay.
All right.
Right. Are there any other questions, Councillor Cuss? And then looking at the recommendations, there's just one recommendation to note the performance of the STARS Social Impact Bond Programme to date. I think there's we would want some reassurance that we are getting impact from this in terms of good outcomes, and clearly that money has been saved, but the value for money thing obviously we need to, as councillors, address. But as corporate parents, we need to address this issue of outcomes, positive outcomes that are protracted, as I call it, but there might be a better word to say. But, you know, life-changing outcomes for those young people.
Yeah.
I think we ought to have a recommendation. Personally, I think we ought to add a recommendation that we'd like to see that and evidence of that within 6 months. Do you think would that be a reasonable time to get some feedback in terms of outcomes?
Yep, that's more than reasonable. Happy to do that report for you.
Good. There's no point in giving a timescale that you're going to say, well, it's very flimsy by then. Okay, right. So shall we have a recommendation? As long as other councillors, I'm only the chair. We're a committee. Everybody's got a vote. Could we have some kind of recommendation that says councillors are pleased with the initial information about this? I would hope that if it is successful, that it will be expanded. And a second recommendation, or whatever it is, a third recommendation now, that information should be provided to a committee within the next 6 months with evidence of value for money and, more important, outcomes.
Yeah.
Did anyone want to add any further recommendations? No? We've dealt with item 8. We're going to 9, Fostering Recruitment Update Report.
That's me. Hi everybody, I'm Judy Levitt. I'm the Deputy Head of Service for Fostering. I actually talked to this committee the time before last and did the annual update report for fostering, and a lot of this is actually duplicated because we touched on all the recruitment activities in that report. So I've done a bit of a summary of the recruitment activity, which I'll go through, but if people want to ask specific questions about the report as well, then you've had a copy of that as well.
Just one question. I couldn't find out what LEAN, L-E-A-N report meant. It's
I don't know what it stands
1.2.
Yeah, I don't know what it stands for actually. Anybody else know what L-E-A-N for? I think it's about being lean in terms of being on target, and smart. And I think that's where the terminology came from. I picked it up, to be honest, as I came into the role. There was already this lean report that was around efficiencies in the fostering service, specifically looking at a lot of it was around IT and how we can be smarter on the systems to see the whole process through from start to end. And it's still ongoing because other areas of pressure keep getting pushed up ahead of us. So there's still things around the lean review that are still ongoing.
Thanks very much.
That's okay. Sorry, I can't answer your question. I'll have to go away and check if LEAN actually stands for an abbreviated term. Oh,
Oh, I
You've
might
got an
have some
answer?
information for you. This is from, I think, is it Goodall? Yeah. Lean is a philosophical way of working which emphasises the removal of waste within a process. A lean process emphasises getting the right things to the right place at the right time in the right quantity to achieve perfect, sustainable workflow. It's gone. But I think you get the idea.
yeah,
I won't-
excellent.
Yeah. It may be confusing because it's 4 capitals, so you think it's an acronym. Right. Yeah.
Should I have not put it as capitals? Is that where I've gone wrong? I've always seen it written as a capital.
Sorry, I'm taking up a lot of time with something that's not particularly important. Please carry on, officer. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I was going to go through the presentation, which is up on the screen, although my eyesight's not very good. I can't actually see that very well. I might have to have it up on my own screen as well. Oh no, there we are, I can see that. It's coming. Okay, we'll move on from the sheep. Right, okay. So I'll just talk you through a few of the new initiatives that we've got coming up that we hope will improve recruitment and also retention. So we're looking at the moment at Derby City Council becoming foster friendly. And it's quite a long process because it does have to go through quite a lot of committees, but we're there really with the policy. What it would mean is that anybody who worked for Derby City Council would be encouraged and supported to foster. And through doing that, they'd get things like 4 days off to complete the assessment and attend training. And then once they're approved, they'd get 5 days extra leave a year. And the idea being that in the olden days, I guess, fostering, you'd have thought you had to give up your job in order to be able to foster. And now what we're saying is that there are foster placements where we can work around parents that are working and still you can still be a successful foster parent. So that's what the recruitment drive is going to be once we've got foster friendly status. And I'm hoping that will be in January. I think it's just got a couple of committees still to go through. So yeah, then the other thing we can do as a foster friendly council is reach out to foster friendly employees and say, why don't you think about this as well? So we know there's a lot of industries in Derby, big industries. Some of them already are foster friendly, but some of them aren't. And we can go to them and say, this would be a good thing for your workforce to consider. And we'll do recruitment events for you, for Rolls-Royce, Toyota, people like that who aren't foster friendly at the moment. So that's the plan going forward. We know that the Payment for Skills scheme, where we are paying foster carers an increment, if you like, on what they can earn, is proving to be really successful. So we're moving through that scheme with our carers, and the knock-on effect of that is that it is encouraging quite a lot of IFA inquiries from the independent fostering agencies who can see that they can earn as much from fostering for us as they can for an independent agency. And alongside that, they can see that the support that they get from Derby City is far superior to what they've been getting in the independent agencies. So at the moment, we're doing really well with that. I think we've got about 7 carers that are in the process of transferring over to us now. So I think that's mainly because the Payment for Skills scheme is up and running, and there's word of mouth from other carers who are saying, come to Derby. We've got a publicity sort of article going out in the Derby Evening Telegraph for 3 days between Christmas and New Year, which will specifically focus on that. And one of the days of those 3, we're asking IFA carers who have transferred to us to talk to the paper about why they've come to us. So fingers crossed that might have some impact. So then another new initiative this year has been our Parent and Child Scheme. So I think you saw on Katie's, one of Katie's reports how many placements we place each year in independent agencies for parent and child schemes, which we've not had up till now in Derby City. So we've now got 7 of our foster carers who are approved to offer parent and child schemes. Which means, and we've got 1 in placement at the moment, that saves us £700 a week for every week that child's in that that child and parent are in that placement. So that's great, and it's all going well. But I think what we could do in the new year is probably actually do a recruitment drive specifically for that sort of fostering, and say, why don't you think about this? This is what this would mean. Because the difficulty for us at the moment is that all our parent and child carers are also foster carers for other approved ages and ranges. So because we haven't got enough foster carers, if they have a gap, if they have a availability, and there isn't a parent and child needing a placement on that day, the likelihood is they'll get filled with another type of fostering. So, I mean, some of the independent fostering agencies have carers who are only approved to offer parent and child, but we're not in a privileged enough position to be able to do that, because we've always got a shortage of carers. And then the family and friends team, Sue-Ann touched on that really. So we've now got the specialist family and friends team who are doing our SGO assessments for the locality services, as well as Reg 24s, which is the foster carers who are grandparents and aunties and uncles. So as well as those carers, we're also doing our SGO assessments as well now. And that's a really efficient way of doing it, because sometimes when a child's placed with family or friends, you don't know at that stage which route's going to be most appropriate, whether it'll be more appropriate for them to foster or to go down the SGO route. So it's one person that will do that assessment, and a decision will be made during that assessment which route they go. So it's a more efficient way of working. The other thing that we're working really hard on at the moment is supporting our family and friends carers. They have had a really hard deal often. They haven't had the support that they've probably needed. Just because they're the grandparents or the aunties and uncles doesn't necessarily mean they've got the skills to manage these really complex placements. So we've got a massive training pathway that we're now doing, and lots of support groups, activities for the children, all sorts of things that are up and running now to support those carers. So yeah, hopefully that will have a knock-on impact on those placements and mean that more children can be placed with family and friends rather than coming into care. Okay, and then other future plans. So a lot of people have mentioned D2N2, but I'm working really closely at the moment with Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire and Nottingham City, looking at ways that we can all work together on the message of Foster for Your Council. We think that together as 4 local authorities we can be bigger than the independent agencies and hopefully make a louder voice so that people come to us rather than go privately. We're not going to be able to completely collaborate with the other local authorities because we pay more money, we offer better services, so we're not going to be able to say come to your council and you'll get the same whichever council you go to, but we'll have a landing page, which means that when you're looking at where you might foster for, the local authorities will come up highest, and hopefully they'll then go to their local authority that's nearest to them or that offer the best service, which could well be Derby, because, as I say, we pay more than the other local authorities. So yes, we're hoping there'll be joint marketing campaigns, a joint website for Foster for Your Council. At the moment, we're looking to roll out our preparation training for foster carers across D2N2. So that will be good in terms of sharing resources. It'll cost us less because we won't have to deliver as often, because the other 4 local authorities will be sharing in that delivery. And then hopefully as well there'll be other specialist training that we can do, which we perhaps can't afford to do at the moment just for our own carers, but club together with the 4 of us, and hopefully we can offer some more specialised training, which might encourage people to take the more complex children. This is a little bit just about the recruitment activity. So you'll see actually our numbers are really drastically down from last year. So last year we had, this year we had 68 fostering inquiries, as opposed to, does that say 120? I think it says 120 last year. I really can't see that.
Yeah, this is 120.
And then the next one, I can't see what it says in the yellow though, it's not showing up.
31 last year, it says for the green one.
Okay, instead of...
18 initial visits got me to 31 last year.
That's right. So 18 initial visits as opposed to 31. So the numbers have really dropped, and that's definitely COVID related. I guess the thing to take some heart from is that we've had 13 new applications this year. And we only had 15 last year, so that isn't a massive drop. The actual conversion rate isn't as disappointing. It's just those initial inquiries that look a lot lower. But in terms of our use of placements, we've done really well this year. So we've had 9 new approvals, but of those 9 new approvals, they can offer us 14 beds, which is a big gain. Because for the deregistrations that we've had this year, we've only lost 8, which means we've got a net gain of 5 beds. And normally on other years, we've been lucky if we've ended up on level, so that we've not lost anybody. I think this year it's looking quite good, actually. Hopefully, we're doing a lot of work on retaining the foster carers that we've got. The support groups next year, we're going back to hopefully face-to-face and a much wider range of support groups. So we've just started a black carers support group. We're looking at starting a group for family and friends carers. We're looking at doing more specialised groups for different needs. And I'm hoping that will have a positive impact. Certainly so far people are saying that they're feeling optimistic that there's a lot going on and that they're feeling supported. I don't think I probably need to identify anything else because you've had the report. If anybody's got any questions from that, then I'm happy to answer anything specific.
Well, thank you. I think you have a really good story to tell, and I know you've been working hard over a really challenging background. And some figures have gone down, but some are stable relatively. I mean, it's such a small sample that a difference of 1 is negligible. And year on year, you might get 5 more next year, and it more than I'm saying 5. Just to figure out at the top of my head, but basically. It's really good. I think this idea that people are coming to Derby, and it could be the way now that if they get more training, they're paid better. Yeah, and also if they widen the scope of their kind of the age range they can cater for, they're also paid better, and that's through training. Yeah, and it's when they're ready to do that. So I think that's all good, and it gives us more chance to have children foster cared within the city rather than remotely, so that any links with family that would be possible or advisable can be maintained more easily. Yeah, I think that's really important for children. I'm sure we all do. So it's a good story, and again, as I say, under the most challenging of circumstances. So that's really pleasing. Have councillors any questions on this report or anything they want clarification on? No?
There is one other area actually that I've just thought of that I didn't mention in the report, which I think you might find interesting. So we're looking at the moment, I'm writing a report to send up to managers about setting up a supported lodging scheme. So that is a form of foster caring, but it's for 16 to 21-year-olds. So it's one of the age categories that we struggle to find placements for. And basically they would be fostered, but the assessment process for a supported lodgings carer is a lot simpler. It's a lot less difficult. And again, it's looking at those people that are perhaps working and so couldn't commit to foster care, but could offer a home to a 16 to 21-year-old. Other local authorities in the area have got a supported lodging scheme and we haven't currently. And we think we could actually manage the recruitment and assessment of it within the fostering service. We've got capacity to do that because our inquiries aren't really high. And then it would just be a case of where it's sat longer term in the department. So it obviously fits better in with leaving care. But what we're offering at the moment, what we're putting forward is that we could perhaps run a pilot scheme and manage the pilot scheme for 12 months within fostering. And then at the end of that 12 months, see how many successful placements, how many carers we've got and how many children we've managed to successfully place under that scheme. So it won't cost anything to roll it out, but it could be a good saving for the department. So that's something else that I'm hoping in the new year we'll be able to get off the ground.
I suppose the question we'd ask there from an earlier report is about the quality assurance of the provision, and also, you know, is it a suitable place? Would that person, you know, be able to cook? I mean, you hear about people putting accommodation these days in extremis. They're putting a family is put in one room and all they've got is a kettle, for example. I'm sure that's the far end of the spectrum. We wouldn't even consider that as a placement. But this idea of quality insurance, I think, is important in terms of what's provided, as well as the expertise and care that they can be given in that placement.
So they would be assessed in a similar way to a foster carer, and then they would go through an approval panel, and they'd continue to be reviewed annually in the same way that a foster carer is. But obviously it would be slightly separate to the fostering panel because it's not statutory in the same way at the moment. So there would still be a scrutiny all the way through around what quality of service they were being offered.
And the other thing I'd just like to explore is the whole way that the council procures procurement, and I'm talking about all the kinds of services. If we provide contracts to places in the city, I think we ought to be asking them to be, are they subscribing up to the foster-friendly approach as a business? So that it's actually not just the council that's doing that, and we do want to kind of expand it out. I think, did you mention Rolls-Royce? I don't know if you did, or was it? Yeah, so I mean, if and Rolls-Royce has signed up to it.
No, they haven't, but that's once we've got our status, if you like, then that's where I think we can go and say, look, the council have taken this, stance. Why don't you consider it as well? And these are what the benefits could be for you as an employer.
Yeah.
So we're not at that stage yet, because I don't think we can go out and say, will you become foster friendly if we're not ourselves?
Yeah.
So I think we need to get our status first, and then we will be going out.
Yeah, absolutely. Evidence that you're working really hard to kind of get people who are prepared to do that, and they're suitable, etc., etc. If we can provide evidence that through that process we've identified people, then Rolls-Royce. But let's look at other firms as well, and maybe through the procurement process. So I don't know how. I mean, I don't know much about procurement, but I know that there are always conditions, and the way you choose a bid for something, a service or goods, you can put conditions in, and it might be worth exploring whether a company would be prepared to sign up to the foster friendly and push or encourage staff. If they're a large employer, you've more chance, haven't you, of kind of sifting out some people who'd be able to support locally.
Yeah.
With the city council rather than an independent fostering organisation, or get people to move who are existing independent fostering organisation people. I don't know if that's something. I don't know. We could put that in a recommendation if people think it's got some mileage. Councillor Kirk, would you support such a recommendation?
Yeah, we're going to suggest the same thing. If we could put in the recommendations to have another report. I think this one says. Yeah, sorry, on the recommendation, if we could see how the initiative of trying to get council staff to become foster parents, see how many people have taken that on board, see the progress in that, and then we can showcase that to other businesses across Derby.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Hussain? Or would you like to refine it?
No, broadly speaking, I'm quite happy. I was just wondering, you said we could perhaps tap into money, supporting people money, to make placements of children between the age of 16 and 21. Is it a similar concept to how people with learning disabilities and mild mental health problems are placed?
Yeah, like shared lives, that's
That's
called, isn't
right,
it?
Because the supervision and inputs required from the placement provider are actually quite minimal. Like if one person pops around every day to make sure the house is clean, they've had breakfast, there is some element of training. But through supporting people, it may be possible, but I'm not aware of any schemes where individual packages of care aimed at each individual, placed in those premises, are provided, because that is quite intensive kind of favor. Whereas under supporting people, the main thrust of funding comes from housing benefit, and then the council provides a little bit more, I think, to cater for some other needs. I was wondering whether that is something that you have in mind, where people haven't got any intensive or extensive individual needs, but broadly speaking, they would require some supervision to make sure that the tenancy is going okay and everything else that's associated with the tenancy.
I guess I
is
wouldn't.
supported.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't see it as a tenancy exactly. That's more like supported accommodation. So we've already got that in place, and I guess that's the thing with this supported lodgings, that it's a different category of person that would probably need that. So it's probably your more vulnerable young people who, or perhaps some young people that perhaps got minor learning difficulties and they're not quite there ready to live independently. So it gives them that cushion, but they would be part of that person's home. It wouldn't be a case of just checking in on them and all of that. It is about them caring for them really, and supporting them to reach independence in that period of time. So they've got a few years in which they can move that young person on. The other category that other local authorities have managed really successfully with the supported lodgings is unaccompanied asylum seekers. Because often they're very motivated young people who want to come into the United Kingdom and, be integrated into society, but they need that bit of support to actually do that, because they're coming in with, no idea of how we run things here. So I think unaccompanied asylum seekers have been, really well placed in supported lodging, and our more settled young people that are perhaps some of the other local authorities have had step downs from residential placements, or maybe an independent fostering placement where they don't want to carry on with staying put afterwards because they're not going to get as much money. But you could have somebody who's been very stable in that foster placement but wants to still live in a home environment, and a supported lodgings placement could meet that need. But it wouldn't meet the need of your really dysregulated, unsettled young people, because there would be a level of independence needed so that carer could still go out to work or carry on with their lives, give them a key, let themselves in and out, all those sorts of things. So they've got to be our more settled young people, or people that are very motivated. But there is that cohort of young people that just need a bit more care for a few more years.
Sorry, if I could clarify, so basically what you're looking at is somebody moving in with a family,
Yeah,
and getting the support that they require in that environment.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I've opened a can of worms here, haven't I, without you even knowing that it was going to be on the agenda, but it's just, I thought you'd be interested to know that that's something that we're looking at.
Oh, we are very much interested. Did you capture Councillor Cuss's recommendation?
I've got a bit of it. See how the initiative of trying to get Derby City Council become family carers works, and then progress externally. Is that
With other businesses in the city.
That was the foster-friendly bit, yeah.
And I think we should add, and that the council should explore procurement as a vehicle for this. And that leaves it, this is part of the recommendation, that leaves it open-ended. If it's doable in law, then procurement could be an avenue to bolster that. If it's not, then obviously we do it by other means. Are there any other recommendations? Well, thanks really very much. We're really heartened by the work you're doing. Clearly, the value for money side comes in nicely with this, but it's also great for outcomes, potential outcomes for our kids who are being looked after, who need foster care, in that they're going to be in, well-trained foster, maybe better trained than in the independent sector. And also, so they're a tremendous asset to the city. And to the young people who need them. So thanks very much, and thanks for supporting all that through your team. So I think we're on item 11, report on diversity and heritage pledge for children in care. And I think I've been looking at obviously the snapshots we get regularly of the number of looked after children in the authority, which has gone up and up. And not necessarily the most recent one, but I don't think the figure will have changed much. There were 34% children in our care who are other than white. So it's really important that this is addressed for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be taking this item. The report was written by Jasmine Nembard-Francis. You will remember she did come to our last plan meeting, but because the meeting couldn't go ahead, unfortunately, she didn't want to be here today, but she can't be here today. She's on leave. So I've offered to present the report in her absence. As part of the report, you'll have seen the attached Diversity and Heritage Pledge, which has been put together. And really, the main thrust of this item is to share the Diversity and Heritage Pledge with the members of the Corporate Parenting Committee. Just to put a bit of context, as you've rightly pointed out, we've got approximately 650 young people in our care. That goes up and down. It's gone slightly down over the last few weeks. I think it's about 638 currently, but it does fluctuate. And within those that cohort of children, obviously there are all those children have got unique and different needs, different heritage backgrounds, different diversity needs. And as an authority, we try to work hard to make sure that we understand those young people's needs and match those needs and try to best replicate those their individual needs when they come into care. However, we don't always get that right, and that's due to a number of variables. Sometimes it's down to our lack of knowledge. Sometimes it's down to lack of appropriate placements. Sometimes, as the report says, we're focused around the safety primarily, and then we kind of look at the kind of diversity and heritage needs. Back in 2020, it was identified that we wanted to make a concerted effort to prioritise young people's diversity and heritage needs in terms of those people that are in our care. And the principal social worker did some work, and it was agreed that we would put together a task group who would look at that particular issue. That task group was convened by Jasmine and a number of people across the council participated in that task group. I myself, as corporate parenting lead, was part of that group as well as colleagues from fostering, commissioning, residential care, were all part of that group. Essentially, we met a number of times. We consulted with young people in care as well as wider council employees, and came up with the Diversity and Heritage Pledge, which is attached or appended to the report. Essentially, the Diversity and Heritage Pledge has prioritised a number of areas within the work that we do. But most primarily, what we've said is, in order to meet young people's individual and unique needs, we need to listen to them. You know, we need to make time to understand them. We need to get an understanding of getting an overview of where they're coming from. So listen to their families as well. So when young people come into care, try to speak to the wider family as well in terms of, you know, what kind of cultural needs have they got, what kind of family rituals they've got, family kind of celebrations. We'll also have an understanding of young people's particular special days, celebrations, languages, try to replicate that within our care. And we know it's not always possible to make a culturally appropriate placement, but what we can do is work with foster carers, work with residential staff. As commissioners, we can work with IFAs and residential providers to make sure that they can do as much as they can to try to meet those young people's needs. And some of that might involve doing some research, some training, but try to kind of understand those needs and meet them as best as we can. So what we've done is, as I said, we included our fostering service. We also included our commissioning service, and those services have already done some work around and making sure that they are prepared for meeting young people's needs. So, for example, in terms of our commissioning services and our fostering services, we've already included additional questions around identity and children's needs when we're looking at placements, you know, and also having better expectations from providers as well. The Diversity and Heritage Pledge is attached. I don't intend to go through it individually. As I said, I've just covered all the areas that are essentially included within that. But what we intend to do is when young people come into care, we intend to give them a copy of the Diversity and Heritage Pledge so they are aware. We want to follow that up with the specific work around listening to them, speak to their family and friends, doing some specific work around their particular needs, and then applying that within the care that they receive from the local authority. What we will do is we will audit that work, we will review that work through our audits, through our case notes, through our inspections to make sure that we are meeting those young people's needs, and obviously provide update reports to the Corporate Parenting Committee, and also the Children Care Council have said that they would like a regular update as well in terms of how we implement this.
Thanks very much. I think this is really a necessary addition to all the support we give and that the respect that we show to our young people by saying, you know, we are taking into account your cultural heritage, and that we want to make sure it can be celebrated and understood better by anyone in contact with you. And I do think it's something that a definite, it's a response to what Children in Care Council have said. And, you know, it's just nice that this is in place now. And it'd be great to get some feedback from Children in Care in general, the council in general, about how it's going down and whether it's making a difference, and that they feel that, you know, their cultural heritage is being more respected and kind of taken account of. The only thing as well, I'd just say, I know this is an example in the appendix 1, it might be age-related how you want to present it, personally, I think. You know, with these pictures, it's
Yes.
good for younger kids, but older ones might feel a bit patronised, I don't know. So you might want to test out with Children in Care Council, with older ones, how they'd like it presented. It's important they're not put off straight away, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? In terms of first impressions count for a lot, and you only get one chance to make it. So I'm just thinking you might want to look at, but that's just my view.
We have shared it with the Children Care Council, and my understanding is that they haven't raised any particular issues around the way it's presented. It is difficult because what we want to do is make sure it's balanced, and it kind of obviously we care for children from 0 to 17, you know. So in terms of that, it's always going to be either you've got to have something in the middle, really, that kind of captures the audience. But part of it will be around the role of the social worker in explaining the Heritage Pledge, explaining the importance of the young person's uniqueness. And I think this is our commitment in terms of having that discussion with young people.
Yeah, and I think the language you use is very clear and very brief. You're not going on, you know, half a page on each thing, but it can be fleshed out in discussion. And obviously some points will be more relevant to some individuals that you're working with than others, you know. So, I mean, in totality, it's a good document, yeah, and a good starting point for making it clear that is a valued kind of facet of that person's identity which is valued.
I'd just like to add, I know Suanne would have said this if she'd been here, obviously this Diversity and Heritage Pledge is focused around our children in care because we've got corporate parenting responsibilities towards those young people. But I know there's some consideration being given more widely around us having a pledge, Diversity and Heritage Pledge, for our children in need and our wider CP children as well. So make sure that, you know, whatever children we come into contact with, we appreciate their uniqueness, their individual needs, and whatever services we provide, we take that into consideration.
Yeah, and I think something that's important there would be that we make sure that all the schools that have children who are, you know, on our books in terms of being looked after in all sorts of categories, that the schools are clear what's happening here, and that they will be supporting that, I hope, already. But it might prompt some to think, yes, we need to make sure that's taken account of in our processes when children are inducted, for example, to a school or move schools. Councillor Hussain.
Just a short comment. I think we should endorse the document, and I think it's a very welcome step forward. We want to emphasize that all children have equal worth, and they're equally valued by us as an authority, and we will be, or we should be doing whatever we can to make sure that their own cultural heritage, other requirements, social requirements, are catered for as much as is possible. And I think we need to be sending that message across to everyone who works with our children and everyone who becomes a recipient of that service. So, yes, I welcome this report and fully endorse it.
Would you like to put that into a recommendation to be added? Yeah. How far did you get with that, Lindsay? Just to capture that idea of working with schools, I think another recommendation that the information be shared with all our schools so that they can take this into account when inducting new pupils from without the city or when they transfer from another school. Are we happy with that? Those two recommendations? Yeah, lovely. So there again, you know, great that this has come up. I think it's really important, and we just have to make sure that diversity is covered. And it could be, you know, that it could be somebody that comes from an EU country, but they will come from a different culture from ours. You know, it'll be a Eurocentric culture, but it won't be necessarily the same as ours. They may have different values and different things they want out of life, and it might be a refreshing thing to hear some of them on occasions, I hope. So thanks very much for that. Thanks to the team for bolstering the kind of quality of support we give to young people and how we respect them and value them, and all their attributes. I think we're getting towards the end of the meeting, so thanks very much for any contribution you've made, and I wish you and your teams a really nice Christmas. I'm just not hoping I don't turn the page and see an item 12. No, I haven't got an item 12. Right, so if everybody's happy, I'll close the meeting with that. Thanks very much for coming along, and particularly if you've sat through it all, thanks very much. I hope it wasn't too dull for areas that weren't your particular concern. Thank you.